Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Gasparo this time, and I am very excited. I have not one, but two guests tonight. And we have a very special episode because we have artist Val Rodrigues, who's going to be here today. You might be familiar with Val's work as one of the artists for Deep Roots from Vault Comics, and also a fascinating comic from A Wave Blue World called Mezo. Volume 1 has been out, and Volume 2 is the issues are coming out right now. We're going to talk to Val all about his kind of journey in art and comic art. And also we have with us Tyler Chin Tanner, the co-founder and co-publisher of A Wave Blue World, who is also the writer of Mezo, who is going to be here to talk about that comic as well. And Val and Tyler, welcome to the Cryptid Creator Corner.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So Val,
pleasure being here. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Thanks very much for being here. So Val, I want to start with you. You are from Brazil, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And
I'm from São Paulo.
Okay. And when did you, I guess, kind of start in terms of art? When did you, first get interested in it? Was it something you did since you were, a kid?
Yeah, it's I've always dreamed of being a comic book artist, but I spent most of my until I was 35 years old was when I really started to pursue this career. I used to work in a hospital, as that the guy that delivers the medicine to the nurses,
Okay.
And then I said, "Oh, I hate this. I don't like working in it." But I always read comics since the 90s. I'm a 41-year-old, so I started later in life to really work with what I like.
So, so you were a fan of comics as a kid then?
Yeah.
But did you do art even, not professionally, but draw as a kid? And
yes, I've always liked drawing and copying the comics I used to read, and Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, that guys from Image and
yeah, you might have heard of them.
Yeah, but and when I was 17, I got into a art school that's very famous here in Brazil. That's called the Escola Pan-Americana de Arte. It's a Pan-American School of Arts, and there I learned more about how to improve. But then I stopped. I never continued pursuing that career until I was 30, more than 30 years old.
So what was it when you got to that point when you're in your 30s? What was it that made you think that you know what, I'm really going to try and pursue, a comic book art career?
Mm-hmm. I think it's passion. When I was working, I used to bring paper and draw when in work, and I was like dreaming awake about doing comics, and and then I got to the point that I asked to be fired, and I said, I actually spent more than a year in my house just practicing,
Oh wow.
putting stuff on DeviantArt, and then was that was when I was contacted by Dan Waters to send a pitch to Vault Comics
Oh
to
okay.
do the prots. Yeah.
So that was so then Dan had contacted you. Dan Waters, the writer of Deep Roots, had contacted
Yeah.
you to put a pitch together for Deep Roots.
Yes.
Um, I love that comic. I love I mean, if anyone isn't familiar with it, it's essentially there's another world that is let's say very vegetal,
Mhm.
and there are creatures there that then invade our world. So there's a lot of character work and creature work that you do that is very plant based, vine based,
Yeah.
um, and it's really wonderful. It's a wonderful story, and
Totally.
the visuals are fantastic. Who do you think is there another artist or other artists or a comic book or style that you think
Mhm.
influenced you, like when you approach a story like Deep Roots?
Yeah. In the proofs, I was very influenced, obviously, by Swamp Thing, you know, Steven Bissett.
Mm-hmm.
Very organic. I like drawing that organic things, and um, yeah, that's it. But my influences. I when someone asks me about my influences, I always get a little bit forgetful because there are so many influences that I don't wanna forget anyone. But I love Liam Sharp that you had here recently on the podcast, and I listened to the
Yeah.
podcast with him, and he's
Oh yeah.
so good, you know.
Byron interviewed my other co-host. Byron interviewed Liam about
Yeah,
um, Starhenge, and
Starhenge.
yeah, I actually in reading some of the later issues of Mezo, which has some thing. Not to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read it, but there are some things in it that reminded me a little of your work on Deep Roots,
Hmm.
and there's some things in there that remind me of Liam Sharp's recent Batman and Wonder Woman. Brave and the Bold that he kind
Yeah.
of did, which was his take on Batman and Wonder Woman and I think Celtic
Hmm.
mythology,
Hmm.
and there's some things that he does in there that were reminiscent of some of the things you were doing. I think that's a good touchstone in terms of I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
see
yeah.
that influence in your work.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
I like Sienkiewicz and Libermejo, but these are like the guys. Oh, who do you wish you like to draw as good as Libermejo? Is like he's he draws too much. Maybe in 10 years I can be that good, but 20 or 30 years.
well, I mean, I think you can certainly see influences of some other individuals in your work. That's why I asked. I was curious, but I really feel that you, especially in Mezzo, have a style all your own. And one of the things I saw as I was kind of going through from volume one to volume two, um, the layout panel
Uh,
designs were getting more
mhm.
intricate and more interesting in terms of some of the action and battle scenes.
Yeah.
Do you I mean, do you like kind of the creature work better, or do you like the action scenes? Do you like facial acting? What is it that really gets you excited when you get a script in front of you?
Yeah, when I started working on Volume 1 after Josh Zingerman, he left the comic, and I started working in his place. I I felt like I had to follow what he was doing, but
Mm-hmm.
putting my style a little bit. And getting to know the characters, it takes time for me, you know. So in volume 2, I feel like I'm more accustomed to them, you know, to their characteristics, to so, but I really like drawing creatures, you know, the arbata that are the plant creatures. I are like my
Hmm.
favorite thing to draw, and you see it on the pages. And there's also that I changed from the traditional inks to the digital from issue 4 of volume 2. I started inking on the iPad, and that
Oh,
also
okay.
changes because I feel like drawing in digital it makes me more comfortable, more confident
Oh.
because I don't worry if I will spill some ink or that I'll make some mistakes.
Hmm.
And but I still draw on paper when I can, you know, I for commissions and stuff.
Yeah. So commissions, you're still traditional.
Yeah, I made
Okay.
a couple of commissions recently, and I drew it on paper.
I think I saw one. I was on just doing some research before the interview and was going through your Twitter page, and it looked like you had done one of the Corinthian
Yeah,
from Sandman. Was that traditional?
no, that's on the iPad on
Oh,
Procreate.
was it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was. If if anyone can go find it when you're listening to this when this episode airs, I mean, it's fantastic.
thank
It
you,
was
thank you.
great. Um,
Yeah.
well, let me bring in our other guest tonight, who's sitting here patiently. Thank you, Tyler. You are the writer of
Mhm.
Mezo, in addition to being the co-founder and co-publisher of A Wave Blue World. And as Val mentioned, Josh Zingerman, I believe, was on issue 1 and 2 of Volume 1, and then Val took over for issue 3 of Volume 1.
Yeah.
So what kind of led you to Val's work, and then this was a comic that you had been writing? What was it that brought how'd you reach out to Val to bring him in on this project?
Well, I mean, with Josh doing the first two issues and then moving on to storyboarding, I wanted to find someone that maybe wasn't, the exact stylistic match, but had something of the same sort of energy, same sort of feel to it. And I had seen Deep Roots. I can't remember what exactly made me come around to his work. If it was Val first on Twitter, if I saw him and I was like, oh yeah, I remember Deep Roots and I should go that, or if I picked up a copy of Deep Roots and sort of looked up Val on Twitter. But either way, I saw that comic, and as you mentioned, like the plant creatures, the floral, everything that fit well both with the jungle setting of the comic, but also the Arbatha creatures. And I knew he had one of the characters that Val got to invent was the Great Mother, who lives in the World Tree, because that was number 3. So I knew like that was coming up. So somebody who could draw a character like that. And there's a big creature, different than looking than the Great Mother looks, but in Bitter Roots, there's a big creature there, and there's just the scale and everything. I was like, oh, that's a great fit. So I reached out to Val just through Twitter, like a message, like, how should I go about, if you're interested in doing a comic or whatever. And it was pretty straightforward. And we got him on there, and he picked up with number 3. And I thought, the transition was very seamless, but as he went along, it became more and more his work and his book by volume 2. And then, he's on volume 3 right now. And I think even more so, this first issue of volume 3, it's just become so much his sort of like, everything visually, aesthetically has just become his now.
Mm-hmm.
All the characters taken over.
Well,
yeah.
We've mentioned some of the things about it, but just since, can you give like a little, maybe like the elevator pitch as to Mezo in terms of the story, Tyler?
Yeah, well, it's a high fantasy set in a Mesoamerican style world. So rather than taking like from a lot of like Roman Saxon type like things or Vikings, I was like, well, let's use, you know, the Mesoamerican, Mayan, Aztec, Inca, things like that. But it's loosely based off of that things. I definitely do pull from some of the gods and the mythologies, but it's not meant to be historical. The idea it's a clash of civilizations, which we had a lot of that time period. You know, one society deems itself greater than the rest, than the dispersed tribes, and that their god, you know, wants them to rule the land, right? And the one leader who says he speaks to the god is like, we will go out on a conquest and take over everybody else. And so then you have a story of them, but you have the story of the tribes that have all been divided and they have their own politics. Now they have to come together and put, you know, family history and so many, you know, levels of that together to resist the Salakul conquest. So
yeah, and I thought going through it even as quickly as I did that I'm like, oh, there's a lot of different characters here. But I felt like there were enough or a lot of visual cues to really set apart who everyone was. Like I didn't need a lot of I didn't have to always go and check the dialogue to make sure, you know, there was enough done in the visual story. You know, with comic books, it is a visual medium, but there was enough in the visual storytelling. I could kind of, oh, I know who this is now. I know this is Rodin. This is, you know, I could kind of get who the people were quickly and tell them apart. Everyone had a very distinctive look, which I thought, you know, was great. I think issue 3 of volume 2 was kind of my favorite going through it. There's that opening battle scene. I love the panel layouts. I love how it's done. It feels different than some of the other work in the other issues. You know, Tyler, is everything, you know, how do you script things? Are they fairly tightly scripted? And, you know, Val, do you have room to kind of experiment and say, you know what, we're going to do this different than we've done things before. We're going to lay it out a little differently. How does that work with your, you know, collaboration, if you both can talk about that?
I think it's something we've been experimenting with. I was probably tighter with volume 1, especially with them taking over. Volume 2, especially when we got to number 3, it was real loose. Like, this is basically what's going on in the fight, but I'm not going to break down panel by panel who's swinging what, but just here's a sense of what goes on. So it got really loose with that. And, you know, I think that's a good direction that we want to go in more, but also I want to make sure, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, you know, especially when it comes to the storytelling aspects, or there's so many new settings, which we're seeing in volume 3, that I want to make sure Val gets the information that he needs and the storytelling beats that to truly understand what I'm getting at here, but also has the freedom to lay things out and break up the panels, you know, as he wishes. So it's still sort of a process, because every comics, you know, it's complicated, and you know, when you're collaborating, but
right, and
mostly Tyler used to number the panels and the actions, but actually some of the pages he just said, oh, this happens, and you decide how to divide the panels into actions, you know. And I in issue that you mentioned, I really like that one, because I've decided to go with the 9 grid panel, the 6 grid panels, for me to maintain the beat of the story, you know, of the action. I mean, that was a really good decision to make.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it worked for me reading it, because it's so action heavy in the beginning, and especially some of the panels, at least, you know, looking at it on my iPad, I'm reading it on the iPad, and some of the panels that are tilted a certain way, it gives the whole sequence an even greater sense of movement, which you kind of need. It really propels the story along, especially when characters are, you know, riding in on giant animals and jumping off, and somebody's jumping off of a cliff into the fray. I mean, it really gives it a great, you know, sense of movement, and I think it's one of the, you know, I really enjoyed it. But I said it feels like one of the stronger issues because there's so many great visual
Yeah.
moments. Like there's some really great, panels in there. So
Mhm.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's something I'd like to mention too, that when I started working on the book, I was, you don't know what you're expecting exactly. You jump on the work, but then when I saw that Tyler was taking the characters from point A to point B, and they meet in some points, and then go to other points. The way that he does that, it's very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very, oh, and he establishes that in volume 2 that the flashbacks are always in the start of the issue, and you notice that some characters used to know each others in the past, and they're
Mm-hmm.
get to meet again. It's very cool.
Yeah, it was fun to play with in Volume 2. Start off with
Yeah.
a flashback. Each
Yeah.
time you get to see, oh, these characters actually know each other a little bit, and here's
Right.
what influences the battle when they're all like running into each other and fighting. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there are some great close-ups. I felt like the facial acting, Val, really. I mean, I don't know like what it was in particular, but like especially in issue like 4 and 5, like, and even in the flashbacks, the facial acting is so good. It feels like it's like just every issue.
Mhm.
There's more and more emotion on the characters, which it's great because you're getting to know them and you're able to get a sense of what it is they are, feeling on the page. So it's really great work. Really,
Thank
really
you.
loved
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
I can't wait to like go through it in depth, and then volume 3 is expected in like May of 2023.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan. We'll keep going. I'm the one slowing Val down now. So, that's
Yeah,
amazing. I need to
but
Yeah,
get.
we're working on it. Working on it.
well, just so for everyone listening, so Mezo, you're going to be able to order volume 1.
Yeah.
Probably by the time this comes out, it'll probably be sometime in August. So it'll be right before, I think, mid-September. You'll be able to get volume 1, and that same time frame, I think, like you said, Tyler, September 7th, issue 5 of volume 2 will be out, right?
Yeah. So Volume 1's been out for the last couple years. We did put it back into previews just
Okay.
to order it with Volume 2 coming out. But it's around, and you can get it on our website and things like that. But yes, the last issue of Volume 2 comes out September 7th, and then the full trade comes out in October, the end of October. So you can get the full second book, depending on if people prefer reading issues or the completed book. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I always want to ask this because I love back matter and stuff.
Mhm.
And I know for the volume 1 that you sent me, there was like a little bit of a breakdown of kind of some, like the historical basis of some of the early Mesoamerican, that I think around 500 AD type of, Aztec, Maya, and other indigenous tribes of that area. Is some of those things going to be collected in the trade?
Yes, yeah. In the first one, I touched on a couple of the things, and in this one, yeah, we touch on the ball game, which is featured in this one. Yeah, some of the councils and things like that, things that are relevant that I took from, because like I said, it's not historical, but that doesn't mean that I didn't pull from a lot to use as a basis for this separate world. Yeah, so that'll be in there, and we had some in the issues too. We have some of Val's layouts up to finished colors, some of the colors. So I think that stuff's fun too, to put in both the issues and the trade paperback.
Oh yeah, I definitely, and I enjoy that stuff. And speaking of the colorists, I think on the first volume it was Doug Gabarak and Varga. Is it Thomas?
Yeah.
Know.
Doug Garbach started it with Josh, and Tommy kind of came on.
Okay.
Yeah, Tommy Varya, I think he goes. He's Hungarian.
Oh, okay.
And then
I think I had it.
Yeah,
I think I had it backwards, but go ahead.
his surname, it's like an Asian culture, but Hungary, I guess Hungary does it as well, puts the surname in front of the first name. So we brought him back for the flashbacks, and then we brought on Gab Contreras for volume 2 to take over Doug's spot, and that way I could go back to separating main timeline and flashback by the coloring. So it's Val's line on both, but a very different color style.
Oh yeah, and you can tell, and both very good. Gab Contreras is a colorist I'm familiar with, has done some fantastic work, and especially in indie comics recently. But yeah, you can tell with the different looks in terms of the flashbacks. It's a kind of a softer type of lighter color palette. And then everything's lettered. Thomas Mauer's been the letterer on all of them.
Yep, he's been consistent throughout. So
nice.
Number one, yeah.
I just like I just like to mention the the creative team.
Yep.
So Val, I mean, overall, looking at this series, and there's so many different things that you've gotten to do in it. You said you really like kind of drawing the bigger creatures in it. I thought your animal work was really good too. Some of the creatures that are ridden into battle are wonderful. I mean, they look very fluffy but deadly. What has kind of been some of the other favorites, or some of the other things that you've been excited about drawing or experimenting with in terms of a series like this?
Yeah, I love that in volume 2 I was able to draw a big battle. As a new artist, everything's a challenge, and in this volume there's, as you mentioned, there's a double page spread of battle with thousands of people battling each other, and a big feline creature, and the arbiter and all that. So it's all very very cool to draw, but also very challenging. And as an artist, you feel like, am I doing this right? Am I good enough for this?
Yeah.
Oh, he's been knocking it out of the park and everything. I think just want to challenge him more, invent some more creatures for him to try. I don't know if he appreciates that or not, but
yeah, but I like drawing Kima and the Fagor, the big strong guy, and with the big sword. There's a scene with him and Kima's mother that's a homage to Frank Miller's The Death of Electra, and that's a very cool scene.
The issues 4 and 5. I mean, the sword that is it Fagor with his helmet. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really cool details in it. In terms of a Wave Blue world, Tyler, just to switch over to you, like what type of things can we can expect? What else might be out from a Wave Blue world that you can talk about?
Yeah, well, this month we're actually launching our next creator series as we're wrapping Mezo Volume 2 up. We're launching next week, actually, a week from today. Crash and Troy #1 comes out. That's like a sci-fi fun. It's like a buddy, because they're mercenaries, which I'm really excited about. That's a blast.
That's awesome. If anyone wants to check out the Comic Book Yeti website, I think I did a very early review of it.
Oh, did you write that one? That was like a couple years ago.
Wow. I don't know. It feels like it was a couple of years ago, but I'm very excited for Crash and Troy to come out. That's awesome.
That had trouble coming out the first time with its first publisher. It came over to us, and we're getting the full 4 issues coming out.
Awesome.
So that'll go through the end of this year with a trade in January. Then we're going to be doing Tower, which we also announced somewhere. That's a futuristic. It's like a virtual reality game. It's like Hunger Games meets Tron type like thing. The writer actually played Batwing and Lucius Fox on the Batwoman TV show. Cameron Stolper. Yeah.
Okay.
And he has his writing partner, Kelsey Barnhart. Chris Cross was the artist. So that'll be coming out at the beginning of next year before we jump into Mezo Volume 3. And then we've got a lot of cool stuff lined up. As you know, production takes quite some time. So lots of titles, but nothing I've announced. The artist of Bloody Hell is doing something else, So you'll see some familiar faces for those who've been reading our work for sure. So,
all right, yeah, I think I first came across A Wave Blue World with your anthology series. Maybe Someday, I think was the second one, right?
All We Ever Wanted and Maybe Someday, yeah.
Yeah, All We Ever Wanted was the first one, yeah, and Maybe Someday, which I thoroughly enjoyed both of those.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have both of those somewhere on a shelf in the other room in my comic book shelf.
We appreciate it. Yeah, we'll keep the anthologies going. We had Young Men in Love come out this year, and we had Dead Beats and Embodied. So that's one of the things we like to put out. Besides having a couple series each year, put out an anthology, maybe a original graphic novel. Yeah.
Awesome. And so Val, how about you? Are you working on anything else, or is Tyler keeping you busy with all those hundreds of people battling each other?
Now, at the moment, it's just Mezo. There's always talk with some writers, and how comics is. Maybe something happens, maybe not. I don't know. But we're always talking to some writers and for something in the future. Let's see.
Right. Well, I'm sure you're going to be very busy because your work on Mezo alone will probably keep you busy. But once folks really start seeing that, it's wonderful. It really is. Fantastic. Yeah. All right. I mean, anything else you guys want to mention about Mezo that we haven't covered yet?
Oh man, I just want people to read it, right? Like it's one of those things, just pick up or take a look at one of the copies. I think I just need to get it like in front of people, and people will be able to tell. And I think for the most part, this will be something they'll be interested in. So, look for it online. I've been doing videos, flipping through the issues. I just, go find it online, see if it's for you, and pick up either the issues or the trade.
Yeah, I'll certainly be talking about it even before and after this because I loved it. And speaking of Crash and Troy and the writer of that, Jared Lujan, he has a Kickstarter right now, but he had the Twin Blades, and I think I always forget the name of the weapon whenever I see it, but the Makwahitl.
Yeah.
I think I saw one or two of them pop up in Mezo.
Yeah, they're in there. Yeah, we were using those as weapons. Yeah, for sure. So we do have some swords in there.
Yeah.
I remember when the first issue people came out, they were like, they didn't have swords, and back then, like, well, it's a fantasy world. I mean, it was sort of like Josh's choice to draw those at first, so we kind of kept them in.
Right.
It was cool, but I was like, when the tribes start fighting and we introduced the Comkin, I was like to Val, I was like, let's start using some more like obsidian blades, and I can't say it either, even though I type it out for Val, but yeah, those bat type weapons.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Val, I wanted to ask you in terms of, because this is kind of influenced by a certain period in history, but it's not historical, as we've said. It is like a fantasy setting, and you guys, you create the rules of it. But is there anything you did have to go and kind of research and say, I want this to look a certain way, and have to kind of dig into what something may have looked like? Or has it just all been a creation of your own?
Yeah, the research I did was because as it's a fantasy and it's not very based on real life. I mostly that movie Apocalypto, that I
Sure.
took some images from there, some imagery influences from there.
Okay.
And internet, I've been seeing on Twitter some profiles retweeting and liking it, that are people that really studied this, and I feel like, oh, please don't judge me too bad because of this.
No, I think you're fine. Well, I really appreciate you both being here, Val. I appreciate you. I understand being shy. I never thought I'd be somebody that would be interviewing folks on a podcast, but I like to do it. It turns out. I really appreciate you being here because I love comics and I love talking to folks who make them. So, Val, thank you very much, and Tyler, thank you for being here as well. I can't wait for all the stuff, for more Mezo and for all the other stuff that you've mentioned that are a Wave Blue World is doing. So I really appreciate you both being here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, fun being on.
And all right, so for everyone who's listening, you're going to go and you're going to check out Val's Twitter page for that sketch of the Corinthian, and then you're going to go check out Mezo and Deep Roots if you haven't, and Crash and Troy, and I'll link everything I can in the show notes. But thank you very much for listening. For Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner, I'm Jimmy Gasparo, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. We also have a podcast of the same name that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.